Welcome to the Trailblazer Talks podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Hope Wilson. The heart behind this podcast is to encourage and equip you to discover your God-given purpose by sharing talks with people blazing trails right where they are. Each week, you'll hear from me and different guests on the show to talk about life, purpose, God, leadership, and a whole lot in between. I love having conversations with people, and I'm excited to get to bring you into those. My hope is that you'll grow and become poised for purpose. I hope each week that you'll feel more equipped to be a trailblazer right where you are. So let's get into this week's episode. Hey friends, I'm so excited for you to hear my conversation this week with my friend Kohlie. She has been such a blessing in my life, and I know that this conversation will bless you. Let's hop into this week's episode. Hey Kohlie, thank you so much for being on the show this week. I'm so excited to have you, and also just to get to catch up with you because I always love our conversations. But in case the listeners don't know who you are, what you do, tell them just a little bit about yourself, your story, all that good stuff.
Hey Courtney, it is so good to be on the Trailblazer Talks. I am literally imagining your theme music playing right now as it's rolling into us. So I feel like I need to move a little bit. But anyway, that's so fun. Thank you so much for having me. I have loved listening, and you know that I'm a huge fan of your work, and you have really, which I guess we'll get into talk a little bit about later, but you really have walked me through some hard seasons of my life through your written encouragement. And I'm just, so thank you so much for having me. My name is Kohlie, and I currently live in Pensacola, Florida. I'm originally from mid-Missouri, a really small rural community in the middle of Missouri. Grew up on a small hobby farm, and I fell in love with a U.S. Navy sailor, married him halfway through my college experience, moved to Pensacola, still continued going to school, and have just really enjoyed where God has taken me by moving south, and at the same time have had the opportunity to grow in community along the Gulf Coast and also take some brave steps that I felt like the Lord was calling me to in sharing what He has been teaching me through podcasting, and really honestly just sharing more of the stories that I have heard from friends. And so it's been fun to kind of take this creative avenue through, I guess, obedience. I don't want to say that too confidently because I always feel like there's so much that I have to learn from the Lord. And I never want to be where I'm doing everything right, which you and I've kind of talked about. I always say I never, anything that I say, it's something that God has showed me, but it may not work for everyone. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for telling everyone about you. I know you kind of mentioned it, but you have a podcast called Still With You. Tell us about the podcast, about your show and the heart behind it, because I love that you have that podcast, and I just love the heart behind it. So I'd love everyone else to hear that.
Oh my gosh. Well, you have been so generous to come speak on it. So I hope that our friends will find your episode. You were I think you were the second person that I ever interviewed who had a book. And so I was feeling so fancy, holding a cover of a book and just being able to connect with you. So I'm really grateful for that. Still With You is a podcast that's basically what we're doing right now. Just two friends hanging out, talking about gold-inspiring stories that connect with hard things that we've walked through, things that we're celebrating, and just really points back to how faithful God is. And I think it's so fun because we can see God working through so many different parts of our lives. So I really love to invite people on who just kind of carried the full nature of I at least try to carry the full perspective of who God is. I've talked to athletes, I've talked to authors, musicians. I love my friends who make music. I feel like they always show me something new, and I learn more about the character of God because I'm just very fascinated with the process of creating music. And teachers, nonprofit founders, just things like that. But how it really started was in 2018, 2018 is when it launched. But in 2017, I had been living in Pensacola for a year, and I just had such a fun time connecting with new people and hearing their stories. And so I would go to have coffee or even just sit on the couch in a friend's house and I would just hear them share part of their heart. And I would then go hang out with another friend. And I was like, how is it that you guys have such a similar story and you don't know each other? Or I wish you guys could meet because you would probably like be able to encourage each other. And so I just kind of took that along with believing that I wouldn't be in Pensacola for very long. And I wanted to remember some of the memories and stories that I learned. So I took that and thought, I feel like this might be a potential way for a podcast. And it was at that time where we were not just seeing like celebrities and people with large platforms who have podcasts. And so I was just like, I think this is what you're calling me to do, God. Is this what you're calling me to do? And I just stepped out and did it with really such a naive heart. Didn't realize that it would last this long. I'd always hoped it would and prayed that it would, but it is really all just like one step in front of the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I love how you just do such a good job of like championing those around you and talking to just not always just like celebrity type of people, but everyday people, which I think is so cool on your show that it's community people and everything. And so I just love that about just what you do online and your show. And I think that's really awesome. And I know you've got some like new things coming up too that I'd love for you to tell us about as well. Cause I know you started with the podcast, but you're kind of growing into some other areas as well now.
Yeah, I am really excited about this. Like honestly, if you hear like my voice a little nervous, I'm a little bit nervous about this new stuff that I'm venturing into, but I'll go ahead and share. So along with podcasting, and you're so kind with your words, by the way. Thank you so much. But how you talked about like me championing other people, which again, that's so generous of you. But I really do have a heart for people coming awake to like the dreams that God puts on their heart and to know that they're worth the process of working hard and trusting in Him. Because I think sometimes we can see things that are so big and we're like, how, God? But working hard is an investment in yourself, and trusting in Him is an investment in yourself. And like, I feel like people are of value. Like God sees us as valued. So we are worth the process of getting out there and just taking a blind step of faith and just letting Him do the rest. And so with that attitude in mind, I have just since launching Still With You had several friends who have just asked me like, how do you podcast? How did you start? All these things. And I am by no means an expert, but I have collected some information that might help. And so I am right now writing a course for our friends to find hopefully just a good starting place for them to learn the basics of podcasting and stuff that took me months to learn. I'll just give it to you in a quick paragraph and just encourage them to step out if that is something that they want to do. So whether this would be for like a business or if it's just a personal narrative, or if it's, I think it's even so cool when people narrate events like where they'll intentionally go experience something and then walk people through it. I love listening to podcasts that are like that. If it's just a roundtable conversation or even like a solo like monologue style of where you're learning something, like I think that there's so many cool ideas out there. And sometimes if we don't have the proper tools to plan, we miss out on what that idea could have been. So my heart is just to help anyone who is interested in starting a podcast. I want to be the everyday girl, the regular girl who records on a stack of books, which I'm pretty sure that I recorded your episode with my mic stacked on a top of books, like in my bedroom. I am that person. I want to relate to that person because I truthfully am, like in my heart, still that person. And so when I say this, I do not mean to bash or discredit anyone who has a podcast course that is prestige and premier and like way over $1,000. Like, I mean, that's awesome. And I'm so glad that they have that available. But I also know where I am and where I see many of my friends, and like, we just can't afford time or financially like to take that much of an investment. And so I love what the Bible talks about, like, don't despise small beginnings. And so I just want to create an affordable place where I can be available to people to not only like encourage them, but also just to offer them all the information that they need to start a podcast. So I have that coming. It's called How to Podcast with Kohlie Browning. That's not really a creative title, but it shares what job, the purpose of it, and I'm really excited about it. I have promised that would be done in January, and then I promised it would be done in February. So hopefully it will be out by the time that this episode airs. But the reason why it's taking long, and I honestly was like thinking about this to really want to do this well, and I want our friends to have as much information and as many like helpful hacks and like subtle secrets and all these things that I have learned along the way. I want them to have it all like available to them. And so that's why it's taking so long. So that's like the little apology label / please be excited label.
No, I think that's so great. And I love that because I think it just relates to everyday people. And I think that there's a need for there to be stuff like that. That's not, I mean, it's great if you can afford those $1,000 courses. I personally can't. And it's great that exists. But I think it's also great, like you said, to start where you are with what you have, and you want to help people with that. And I think that shows too. And that's another reason I wanted you on the show, is because you are a trailblazer right where you are. And trailblazer basically means like you're kind of in the weeds, like taking out the bushes as you go kind of thing. You're forging your own path, and then you're leaving kind of breadcrumbs for those to come behind you and make it a little bit easier for them. And I love the title personally, because that's really great SEO. So like if I were to go to Google and be like, how to start a podcast, you would probably pop up, because like that's what people are searching. They're not searching like podcast phenomenon or, I don't know, that's a made up name, but you know what I'm saying? Like that's a searchable name. So I think it's always better to be clear than catchy is my kind of phrase with stuff. So I think it'll be great.
Hey, you are the creative marketing mastermind. So like, that is so generous of you to even like say like, thank you so much for encouraging me in that. Cause I am very unsure, but I'm also, I think I'm unsure, but I'm very certain that this is like where God wants me to go. So I kind of am like going with confidence, knowing that it's not going to be perfect. And I think that's like such a good attitude that like, I know you carry and that I attempt to carry, where I'm just like, I am not a perfect person. And half the time, I don't even know what I'm doing in the next week or so. But I really think that there's nothing wrong with inviting people in and just saying like, hey, I feel like God's stirring something in my heart. Can you walk alongside me, or can you just at least listen to me share my dreams? Because I think sometimes we just contain those, and then I'm like, I don't want that to die. I want those to serve purpose for the Lord. So, I mean, I just think that it is so vital that we let ourselves have those moments where we're just like, number one, like it's worth the process of following the Lord. And also like, it's worth the process, even if it like lasts for, not if it's a seasonal thing, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I think if you go into it with it being like, okay, I'm going to do this and it's got to be great, that how can you have fun and also just follow the Lord? Because it probably will start one way and then you'll end up taking so many different trails and figuring out like who you are, which is my experience in podcasting and like growing up essentially.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that and think that is a really great way to view stuff. And I mean, the Bible talks about seasons in Ecclesiastes, and there's a time for everything. And so I think that that's really, really important. And I think it's awesome that you are, meeting people where they are and stewarding the gifts God's given you. And, it's not free to do this stuff. So I think it's great that you're creating something that's affordable that will help you, further your calling and what God's called you to do, but that it'll also help someone else step up by taking the course and being able to start their own podcast and use their voice for whatever purpose that God's given them as well. So I think that's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's through the website Teachable. So it's a credible website where, I'm learning to use this language, like where with exchanges and just kind of the whole like financial things. Like it's not just me like with Venmo in my back pocket, people. Like it's through a credible website, Teachable. So I'm excited about it.
I'm excited for you. And I also love that you are a trailblazer right there in Pensacola with your podcast. And I know you serve your city well and your church well, your local church there. I would love to hear more about kind of what you do in your city and the connections you've made, and just kind of encouraging others to be trailblazers in their own cities or towns, whether it's a big city or a small town, whatever in between. I think it's important to trailblaze right where you're at.
Oh my gosh. Well, I thank you so much, but I feel like I'm talking to the local church advocate, because there were so many times in 2020 when you would share something about your local church, like serving or when services are. And I honestly took so much from that, Courtney, because I really think that it's hard sometimes. This is not the answer to the question that you had, but it is hard sometimes when you are committed to the local church and you become family with a church, because there's just many things that happen in regular families that happen in churches, in my personal opinion. And so anyway, to just throw this at you for a second. Like, I just really think it's very brave, but also very, just like, I feel like the Lord is so proud of you for just like jumping in a new city and becoming invested. I know that's not easy. And so anyway, I just wanted to say thank you, because even though I am not in Cincinnati, I was like looking at all the service times. I'm like, wish I was in that city. That'd be fun. It was just encouraging me to be like, okay, like keep going. Like this is worth it, So.
Well, thank you.
Yes. Okay. So back to your question. So I moved to Pensacola in 2016. So I've been here for 5 years, and I love my city. I love living on the Gulf Coast. I love the people here. This is such a fun city because of how rooted it is, but also there's so many people that are coming and going. So like there's some people who live here lifelong, and then there's other people who are here just for a season. And I think it's such a fun mix. And being in a military community where we have NAS Pensacola right in our backyard, NAS Pensacola, Corey Station, and then we have a bunch of Air Force bases that are nearby. Like we have such a cool diversity amongst the people who live here, people from all different nations and backgrounds and life stories. And so I just really think that's fun to celebrate and get to know people who are not like me. And I found that so rewarding. So that's a little bit about Pensacola if you've never heard of it before. And I thank you so much for saying that I'm a trailblazer in my city, because I love to, how do I say this? I feel like that is such a generous thing, because all I can think of is just the people who have encouraged me to speak even when I didn't feel like I was ready, or to have big dreams and pray big prayers, even though I was not sure of what the Lord was doing or how to move in the next step. And so like, I think of my friend, Kristen Lipscomb. She is the founder of The Secret Place, which is a safe house nonprofit organization that helps to fight and end human trafficking, which provides like a home for children who are survivors of human trafficking. And so I think of like the prayers that she and her family have prayed over our city, and just directly like her direct encouragement for me. And I think of my friend, Tyler Burns, who was a young, like learning his history of being like a young creative in Pensacola, like just blazing so many trails that I didn't even know were set for me to walk through. And I feel like and you've kind of touched on it earlier, I just always want to be someone who has open arms and will offer just anything that I feel like is helpful. Like I just never want to hold it like with a closed hand, right? Because there's just so many people have been like, lifted me up when I did not feel worthy of their words or even their prayers, honestly. And so I like to think that if I move out of Pensacola eventually, that I want to leave the city better than when I moved here. And so that is my prayer. And I think it really is fun to see how the podcast has connected other people who might not have been friends before, and also just reminded people that they matter. And it is fun to see though. And I don't know if I'm not going to say like this is directly me, because it by no means is. It could just be like the time of more people feeling confident and brave to step out. But I do notice that there are a lot of young creatives in my area who are using podcasting as a platform, and just young people in general. And I don't know if there were 5 years ago, like as many. And so that that is not directly from me, but I do know that I've prayed for there to be an uprising of the next generation younger than me, and just a community of creatives who also love the Lord rise up. So I'm sorry, that was such a long answer. I literally was like processing some of that myself.
No, you're good. No, I think that that's exactly in my mind when I think of like a trailblazer, whether you're in a big city or small town or whatever in between. That's what I think of as someone who is kind of leaving a legacy, leaving something when they move on or to the next thing, or when they, keep doing what they're doing, but life takes them somewhere else. And I think that's so cool that whether it was a direct implication of what you started, or if it was just other people being inspired by it or whatever, you started something and it was a ripple effect. And so that's what I hope people hear is just start where God put you and blaze the trail he's giving you, and maybe you're not the first person to ever do it. When I say trailblazer, I don't mean the first. I just mean that you're blazing the trail that God has given you. And a lot of times there's a lot of unknown moments. There's a lot of moments of uncertainty, but you stay obedient. And I think that that's what's so cool to see in your story, Kohlie, because you kind of came up in podcasting before it got as popular as it is now. And so in a lot of ways, you were blazing that trail for your community, and then you got to connect people. And I think that that's so cool. And I would love to hear your thoughts too on just kind of hearing God and like being obedient to whatever he calls us to, because I feel like you do that so well. And I would just love, again, I know like none of us are experts, but I would love just to hear your take on that and just any advice that you've learned in that area.
Well, I mean, honestly, I feel like I've like learned stuff from you too, because I love the story that you shared about when you went to go write It Is Written. I love how you talked about how you had a friend who said, do the last thing that God told you to do. And voila, we have It Is Written, which is absolutely a gem. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to write it, Courtney. Like sincerely, I don't think we thank you enough for it, but,
thank you.
But I mean, it's kind of that, like, I love how you said that, like, do the thing that God told you to do last. But honestly, how I feel like the Lord speaks to me, and again, this is just everyone has their own communication with the Lord because it's a relationship, right? We all like date different people, have different ways of like building friendships. So I look at my relationship with the Lord like I do a friend. And so I find it to be very helpful when I journal. I know that's not for everyone, and sometimes that's a very like Christianese answer. But I really do find it to be worthwhile to record my thoughts and return to them. And also I love to just practice like free form of where I will just like ask God, like, is there anything you have in your heart? And then I just honestly invite the Holy Spirit to take over. And sometimes I'll write even a word, or he'll remind me of a certain verse, or just even someone to pray for, or just something just really encouraging that I know for a fact that I did not come up with that on my own. Like I'm not that creative. And I feel like Holy Spirit is very creative. Like one time I got this word from my grandma. It was the coolest thing. And the Lord was like, my word is like the best vitamin. And I'm like, yeah, like that's so true. Like, isn't God's word like the best vitamin? And I'm like, I didn't know that, God. I mean, I don't know. It was just funny because I was like, I couldn't have come up with that on my own, And so I think that kind of thing always just encourages me. But also I think that if someone's wanting to press into the voice of God and really just be intentional and even like ask him to speak more often to them or to remove any distraction. I just don't think there's anything wrong with going to the Word and just reading the Bible, not through a devotional, not through someone commentating, just asking the Lord to highlight what he wants to highlight for you. It's gold. We need it. And I love that we have this guide so that when we put anything else against it, we can tell whether it's fake or whether it lines up with scripture. And so I think that's a great place to start. Plus, when in hanging out with a friend, the more you hang out with them, you can kind of get used to their pattern and then their voice and like what they're going to say next, right? Like I'm sure you've had friends you have where you know exactly what they're going to say even before they go to say it. And I think it's that way with God too. Like the more that we spend time with him in his word, he is consistent. And so I know when I go to the Lord and I say, hey, I'm really scared that my car is not going to run today, or it's not, or I just had an incident with my dryer and I was like, God, like, I'm really scared about that, my dryer is going to go out, which is such a silly fear compared to world hunger and, all the big things, but those can really wreck us. And even though I know what he's going to say, right? That he provides and that I can trust him and that he's worthy of my praise and he knows me better than I know myself. I still want to go to him and hear him say that to me, even though I know he's going to say it, but there's nothing like it when your friend just calls you out and says, hey, I see you in this moment, but also like, I want to remind you of who you are and like what I'm going to do for you. And that I have plans for your life and that I will never leave you or forsake you. And so I love that about God. Like, I love that he's so intentional to allow us to have those moments with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that that's awesome it's awesome advice, because that's what I was taught as well, is like, if you want to learn God's voice, go to his word first, because that's how that's the main way he speaks is through his word, because that's, it would be like reading your personal journal, so to speak, like if I want to hear how you speak, like I read what you could write or whatever and commune with you and all those different things. And I think it's just beautiful because nothing's too big or small to bring to God. And, we all have different worries in our lives and different things. So whether it's, our dryer or our car starting or the fact that, like the weather or whatever, I think it's important just to bring it to God and he wants you to bring it to him, whether it's big or small. And then when it comes to obedience, if you sense him telling you to do something, pray about it. And then, then act on it. And if he's not going to tell you to do anything that goes against his word. So if it's something crazy that's like not something that's scriptural, like if he tells you to do something that's, to go rob somebody, like obviously that's not God. But if it's something like, start a podcast or something that's like outside your comfort zone, I think I heard Annie F. Downs say it this way of, I would rather be obedient and find out I was wrong than to have not been obedient and find out that it really was God. And that stuck with me. So yeah, I love that.
Absolutely. Yes. It's so good. I was actually like, I had a few verses, not a few verses, but I had one, and then I was like, I felt like maybe this one is like what I'm supposed to share. I love Exodus. I always go to it during the spring for some reason. Okay. All right. So this is from Exodus 33, and this is at the end of the book of Exodus. And it talks about how Moses sees the Lord's glory. And so I hope that you go read this in context, but I am going to read this first just because I love how encouraging it is. And so this is just Moses talking to the Lord. And so it says, Exodus 33:15 said, then Moses said, if you don't personally go with us, talking about the Lord, if you don't personally go with us, don't make us leave this place. How will anyone know that you look favorably on me and your people, if you don't go with us? For your presence among us sets your people and me apart from all other people. And I just find that so encouraging. There's another another verse in Exodus that I've been like loving, where it talks about how the Lord like led the people to, I think it was like 77 palms and along the water. And you just talking about how when we go with the Lord, like, you're right. Like, what's it hurt if we don't succeed? Like, we learn something, and also our trust grows with the Lord. And I think that we have to stop looking at the instant results and look at the long-term game, which is so what I need to hear every day, because I can get so down and discouraged. So please know that I'm speaking that over myself for sure.
I think that that's great. And I think that that's the key, is like God going with us. And like, if he doesn't go with us, then like, I know personally, like, I don't want it if he's not in it. And so I think that that's a good way to look at things. And then, like you were saying, with the fast results versus like the instant results versus the long game, I think that God more often than not plays a long game with most things in life, from my experience of just reading him in the Bible and different stories throughout the Bible, and then just in my own life. And I think that culture teaches us this instant gratification, instant everything. And so then it makes us kind of doubt our faith sometimes whenever God doesn't answer something quickly. And I know I've doubted that with several things before, whether it's with, for me, with like dating, or with like all the stuff that I feel called to do online and stuff like that, because I see these like quote unquote instant success stories. But I know that if God calls you to something, like scripture says, like he will, like, this is just me paraphrasing, but it basically says like, run, like complete your race, like he will see you through the end of it, kind of thing. So I think that that's really good.
Yeah. I love it. Isn't it going to be fun? Like someday where we're just like old, wrinkly old women, and we've just like God just literally like used us so much. Like I love, sometimes I don't avoid thinking about the long game, because I just am like, man, like I am so glad that God has invested in me for the long haul. You know what I mean? So like,
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know where I'm going with that thought, but that was just like hot off the skillet. So yeah.
No, I love it. Cause I don't know if you've seen War Room, but I love the little old lady on War Room, because like, that's like what I want to be when I'm older, is like, send me another one, Lord. And like that she has this whole like wall of prayers that like she's prayed her whole life and has seen God like come through on. And I just think that's so cool to be. And that's like really what it's all about, is leaving a legacy. So I think that that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And kind of going along those lines, I know I keep saying this, but I just love how well that you cheer on everyone around you, and you're just so genuine in how you build everyone up around you and give them encouragement. You give me encouragement all the time, which I am so appreciative of. And I would just love, because I know we live in this kind of comparison and like competitive culture that tells us like everyone's your competition, like compete, compare, but you seem to do so well with encouraging others and championing others, that I would love to just hear how we can be better at kind of following in those footsteps of encouraging others, and not letting comparison keep us from doing just that, encouraging others and living out our own calling.
Well, that again is so very kind of you. I really appreciate it and don't feel like I'm deserving. It really just means a lot for you to even say that I'm good at encouraging people. I actually think it's really fun to do, and I really enjoy it. But I know it's not easy, especially because I too am not exempt from feeling the comparison trap, or just feeling like I'm not enough, or that I've failed, or I haven't done a lot of what I was supposed to do, you know. So I'm not exempt from that, but I definitely do not let myself get wrapped up in that like I used to. And I'm learning every single day, in small moments with the Lord and big moments with the Lord, that I'm free from that. And so I don't have to stick to that narrative. But I have a few thoughts on this, but I think I'm just going to share the one that has been most significant to me in the last year. And I think that in encouraging people, and even just not falling into the comparison trap, I think sometimes we think that when we go to do something that we feel like the Lord's calling us to do, whether it's encouraging someone or moving forward, even though we don't feel like we're supported by any friends or that no one sees us or we're alone. I think that, or even going out of our way to encourage someone, right? Like that takes a lot of energy. Sometimes it can, depending on what it is, or just takes a moment where we're not focused on ourselves. But I feel like sometimes in doing that, we just have to think and approach it like, I'm doing this and I'm doing for the Lord, and that's enough. Like if I never am rewarded for this, if no one ever sees me do this, if I am not going to see an instant result or just any of the superficial things, or even see success from this, like if I feel like the Lord wants me to do this, to encourage that person, to send that person a text, to stop and remember that person's name or their kids' names, or just ask them genuinely no, but it might not fit like what I'm doing right now, it's enough. And just trust in him, and to know that we will never be filled by the praise of man. Like I love when someone will encourage me, but I also have had that and it has been very filling. But at the end of the day, like it just doesn't add up. Like I always want more, and that feels such a contrast because I'm like, go out and encourage people, but also it's never enough, I don't mean that, but I do think that we just have to switch it in our mind to say like, okay, God, like this is for you. And that is enough and it is worth doing. And so sometimes even when I say that, I just release it. And at the same time, it kind of becomes more fun because it's no pressure, right? Like if I do something and I'm thinking, I got to see this happen, or I got to make this happen, or I want them to react this way, or hopefully this will be the outcome. Sometimes it hurts my heart more when it doesn't go the way I want it to. So when I just am like, okay, God, well, you told me to do this and that's enough. And so whatever you want to do with it, I'm on board with it, which is just like submitting to his will, which we're called to do. But yeah, that's kind of what I think about that and what God's been showing me.
Yeah. No, I think yes, absolutely. I think that's a good way to think about it and to process it too, because I think that it can feel like a task. I have to encourage all these people, but really like it should kind of flow naturally. And like, we should look to God for that, for God to fulfill us versus like the actual like encouraging words. But I think that when we encourage others, like you said, it kind of keeps us or helps like alleviate some of that comparison, because it's kind of hard to like compare when you're uplifting someone else. At least that's what I've found. So I think that's great.
Right. And like, just do it by proximity. Like God didn't ask you to go save the world. And I feel like that is so my personality sometime, where I'm like, oh, if I'm going to do this for one, I want to do it for all. Like I want all of my friends to feel good about today. So I'm going to you don't have to do that. I think sometimes it's just like, okay, who's the person who's next door to you? Like your kids or your spouse or your roommate, start with them and just see how the atmosphere changes when you say something kind or thank somebody or take a moment to ask them how their day was. I mean, I feel like we overcomplicate it, and God never overcomplicates things.
No, I fully agree with that, because I think that, I mean, it even says, I think it's in Acts, I want to say it's Acts 17, that it talks about like your sphere of influence and using that sphere of influence. Like God has assigned each of us kind of our own boundaries and area and put us in the place that he's put us in. And that also goes with the people he's put in our path too. So I think that it's important to steward what's in your hand and steward the people who God's placed in your life, instead of always grasping for kind of the people outside of that. And because I think that like the more you steward what's in your circle, the larger your circle will grow. And like the more God will like expand your like tent, so to speak, as he says in scripture. So it goes back to what you said earlier about kind of the small things, or like doing good with like what's in your hand, doing good with the little things. So I think that that's a really good. Switching gears just a bit, I also know you mentioned this earlier, talking about living in Pensacola and that you're a military wife. And I know your brother is also in the military. I would love just for you, whatever comes to mind with this, but I'd love for you just to encourage and tell us a little bit about kind of those experiences with like being a military wife, but also having a family member in the military, and just any encouragement for those out there who maybe they are a military spouse themselves, or they have family members who are in the military, or maybe a deployed family member. Because I know, wasn't your brother deployed, or maybe he still is. So I'd love for any encouragement you could give to families.
Yeah. I'm by no means an expert, because I've read and heard more stories about the things that people have gone through. I've been listening a lot to like Taya Kyle right now, she's the wife of Chris Kyle, who had passed away a few years ago, and just hearing some of the things that she's walked through, I'm like, man, like military community is tough. Like they're some of the strongest people that I know. And so my brother, Ben, he actually was deployed to Afghanistan for 9 months, and he came back home safely in April. Yeah, April of this past year. And I'm so grateful. He's got a little German Shepherd lab mix dog. Her name is Bear. And so he is loving being at home and just spending time with her, getting back into the college route and everything. And my friends and listeners of the podcast have been so generous to pray for him, including you, Courtney. And that was a really hard year, because I felt like my family couldn't breathe. Like it was just like every single text, every single moment was just kind of like caught up in this thing where we felt like we were underwater, just praying that he would be okay, that he was safe and healthy and being provided for. And that was just a tough year. And then my husband, Chris, he has served in the Navy for 7.5 years. And then this year he moved from serving as an active duty member in the United States Navy, and has moved to the Air Force Reserves. And so he's taking that time to go to school, and we hope to eventually transition back into being active duty as a chaplain in the Air Force. And that is something that is kind of a brave step for us, because there's a lot of job security in military life, with insurance and just a consistent paycheck. And, you sign a contract for your job. So it was hard for us to pray about coming out and going to the reserves, which is very different from active duty. And so that was tough, but I am already seeing like how God's rewarding that. And especially him, like Chris is being rewarded for his obedience. And I'm really excited to walk that journey with him of like just seeing what's next. And so that's really been a stretching part of my faith for sure. But for any spouse or sibling, I think my best advice would be to give yourself grace, because there is so many moments where you feel like you are out of your mind, just kind of feeling like, why have I not been able to control my emotions? Why do I feel like I'm grieving something when all of my family is here in the room with me? And I think that military culture always puts this invisible clock on the wall, just at Christmas, at Thanksgiving, especially because leave is so hard to get. And also it's so limited, and it's not like you can cancel plans and pick up where you live and move. You are stuck in a place for a while. And there's just a lot of stress that comes with like different training periods and everything. So I think like, if you feel like, how is it possible that I should be happy in this moment, but I'm actually sad? I just think that you have to be kind to yourself, and just give yourself an abundance of grace to know that you don't have to have it figured out. And it is absolutely normal, in my opinion, for you to feel deeply all range of emotions when you're in that kind of environment, because there's just so many things that go against like what we're supposed to feel, dealing with high risk jobs, dealing with like limited time, trying to make moments last. I never go into an airport feeling joy ever, really. I mean, even it's weird, Courtney, like even when I will arrive to visit family or something, like airports make my stomach hurt. a lot. I had a really awkward, actually very traumatic goodbyes in airports before. And so that's weird. Like no one should go to an airport and be like, why do I feel like I'm going to have a panic attack? Because I remember like standing here at the same gate and like thinking, when am I going to see that person again? Anyway, so just give yourself grace, because no one has it figured out and you are not crazy. I think that's it. Like you are not crazy. You are just in the middle of it. And there is relief. Like hold on to the little moments when you can feel relief, because it is there. And it's just, I don't know how to close that other than just to say like, it's worth persevering through. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that that'll definitely encourage people, because it's real and it's honest. And I think that people often relate more to real and honest instead of just like a fluff answer of, do these things and you'll be fine. Cause I don't relate directly, but I can imagine how difficult that would be to have to like continually move or say goodbye or wonder what's going to happen and stuff. So I think that that's a beautiful answer that will encourage and help those who may be in the midst of it or about to enter that kind of season, because I think that it is a range of emotions, and God gave us a range of emotions to feel all of them and not just suppress it and be like, oh, it's because I have God, I'm okay. Because we are okay with God, but we're allowed to feel at the same time. And it's a growing process with him too. And it's okay to feel those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were so kind to walk with me, even like just through your book, because I was looking at it today. I was like, as before this, I was looking at just a few notes that I had written in like the thoughts, feelings, in the thought space. And I have like one, I wrote like, I was like, my brother leaves tomorrow. My feelings, I felt like I was right back on the couch. Yeah, here it is. It said today I say goodbye to my, tomorrow I say goodbye to my brother. And that was in June. And I have some other, like I have one spot where I just wrote like stronger, like underlined here. And I'm like, I don't know what I was feeling that day, but man, you were so generous to share your words with me through that season. So I think that would be my other piece of advice. Just go get It Is Written, because there was many times when I didn't want to open the Bible and you were just like, hey girl, I got your back. Like let me interpret the scripture for you and help you get encouraged. So my absolute favorite chapter was like this season, your section about hope. That was just gold. So,
well, thank you. I'm so glad that it was a comfort to you in that season. And that was really my hope and my goal behind that book, was just to meet people where they are and whatever they are feeling, and give some scripture to kind of help them in the moment and give them just some tools in their tool belt. So I'm glad that it was encouraging to you. So the heart of this show is to talk to people who are blazing trails on their own God-given trail, as you know, and I would just love for you to kind of leave us with one piece of advice for the listeners that you've learned along your trail in life, just something that's been significant for you.
The thing that is jumping out to me right now is I heard in a conversation once, actually on a podcast, I love this. It's not from the Bible. It's not anything that, you can. Well, I mean, it's not like a like Christian answer of like you can find in the Bible, but it's something that I've found really high of value is I love like, I think it's so cool and I've heard someone say it like this before, like when you walk into a room, you don't want to be like, here I am. Instead, it's so important and just something that I like to practice, and hopefully I'm practicing it well, so that when I walk into a room, I don't want to be like, here I am. I want to be like, oh, there you are, and to point out the other person. I think that we all I think it'd be fun to see the change that happened in our own home and in our workspace if we kind of adapted more of that attitude where we didn't look at ourselves so much and just extended the hand to the other person and just really see them for where they are, and not even for like who they could be, but just like really see our friends and just appreciate them for who they are right where they're at. So yeah, that's a little answer that's just something that I've always loved and carried. And so when you asked that's immediately what came to my mind.
I love that because I think that that's important. And that's something I try to work on too, is being others focused instead of like so like self focused. Because then when you're others focused, that's a little bit more like you're service oriented instead of like self oriented. So I think that that's great advice. So thank you. Switching gears, just the like last couple questions. I would love just to hear, just for fun, anything that you're currently loving or enjoying lately, because I think it's always just fun to hear what other people like.
Yeah. I mean, it's grape tomatoes. It's so funny. I have literally never loved tomatoes in my life. And this year I bought some grape tomatoes, which I've learned there is a difference between grape tomatoes and baby tomatoes. Grape tomatoes are more of like an oblong shape, and I think they're a little bit sweeter than just regular tomatoes. But I've just been cutting them up, putting them in my salad, and then just sometimes popping them in my mouth, which is so funny because I feel like my taste buds, and maybe you can relate, Courtney. I don't know if you have like food like this, but like my taste buds have so evolved. Like I used to not like coffee. I like coffee. I used to not like sushi. I like sushi. I used to like, I'm talking years of like not liking these things. And then like within the past 3 years, like I love LaCroix now. Like give me all of the sparkling water. I'm like, what is wrong with me? But I just am really grateful for my taste buds changing, because I feel like I'm like, even like runny eggs, like I used to only want my eggs scrambled, but like in the past, like over the past year, I've been appreciating like having runny eggs. Like I'm just saying like grape tomatoes, that is my new obsession. That is where I'm at. I love some grape tomatoes, and they are just, I love the color. I love the taste, the texture. Anyway.
I love it. I love it. Well, is there anything that you want to make sure that you talk about with our listeners before we get off today, or anything that you didn't get a chance to promote that you want to make sure that everyone knows about?
First, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on, because I love all the work that you're doing, Courtney, sincerely. And you are such a hard worker, and it encourages me to continue to do what I do. Even you're in Cincinnati, right? Like the spillover of encouragement is a real thing. And I just am really glad to know you. And hopefully we can connect soon too, whenever you come down to the Gulf Coast. And like, also thank you again for all the hard work that you did with the hurricane. That was so kind of you and your people to come and support us. So I like that. That means a lot to me and my community and my friends here. I think I would just hope that our friends would, come over to Still With You and just hear a few episodes or conversations that might inspire, I think, to the things that you shared about It Is Written. And I think that it's fun when podcasts, almost like it's like a Venn diagram, right? Like we share our people. And I think that I love when that happens. So subscribe to the podcast. Also stay plugged in with this podcast. And that's pretty much it. I'm really excited also for the podcast course. So if that is something that you're interested in, for sure, just send me a message, and I do not mind starting the process of just encouraging you or looking at what you have and seeing if we can move forward right now. Even if the course is not launched, I don't mind doing that. And I guess I could share this too. I should have shared this earlier maybe, but this is something that I'm not like highly advertising because I'm limited with my time, but I also am editing and kind of like producing podcasts. I have one that I edit right now for a friend. And so that might not be something I put on my website for a while, but if you have a podcast and you need an editor, I would love to be your girl. I'm not an audio engineer, but I do have what I've learned from hosting Still With You and what little bit of tech I've learned. And so I know that editing can be such a process. It can be very draining. And so I actually like it. And I would love to talk with you if that's a service that you need. So that's something that definitely just email me, CohlieBrowning@gmail.com, or send me a message on Instagram. And again, like that's not something that you probably will find on my website anytime soon. But for our friends here at Trailblazers, like I would love to offer that and just talk with that if that's something that, could be a potential thing that I could help someone with.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what's your Instagram and stuff? How can people connect with you? I know you mentioned your email.
Yes. Oh yeah. It's very simple. I'm just Kohlie Browning all over the place. Kohlie. Browning like the rifle. Yep. So that's the ways that you can connect with me for sure. And I'm very personable. Like I love connecting and meeting new friends.
Yes, you definitely are. And I love that about you. So definitely make sure you go follow her, check out the podcast, of course, when it comes out, check out her podcast, all the good things, connect with her. But Kohlie, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me today and to be on the podcast. I appreciate it so, so much.
Courtney, you're the best. Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it.
Man, that conversation was so good. I know that it helped me so much, and I hope that it helped you as well. Be sure to go and connect with Kohlie and listen to her podcast called Still With You. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to our podcast and leave us a rating and review. And that way that more people will be able to find the show and connect with us. I hope you have a great week. We'll see you next time.